Sergeant Marcus Thompson had served the Royal Guard with unwavering dedication for 15 years. His pristine uniform bore medals earned through countless hours of protecting the royal family, and his reputation among fellow guards was nothing short of exemplary. Every morning, he would arrive at Buckingham Palace 30 minutes before his shift, ensuring his appearance was flawless and his knowledge of security protocols remained sharp. The autumn morning started like any other, with Marcus conducting his routine inspection of the palace grounds. The crisp October air carried the scent of fallen leaves as he walked his assigned route, checking each checkpoint with the thoroughness that had made him a respected figure among the palace staff. His colleagues often sought his advice on complex security matters, and newer recruits looked up to him as a mentor who embodied the very essence of royal service. As Marcus completed his morning rounds, he noticed an unusual commotion near the staff entrance. A group of senior officials had gathered, their voices hushed but their expressions tense. Among them stood Commander Harrison, the head of palace security, whose stern face suggested that something significant was happening. Marcus approached cautiously, his instincts telling him that this gathering was more than just a routine briefing. The conversation stopped abruptly as Marcus drew near. Commander Harrison's eyes met his, and for a moment an uncomfortable silence filled the air. The other officials exchanged glances, their body language suggesting they were discussing something confidential. Marcus had experienced enough of these moments during his career to recognize when he was the subject of discussion, and an uneasy feeling began to settle in his stomach. "Thompson," Commander Harrison called out, his tone more formal than usual, "report to my office at 1400 hours. We need to discuss your current assignment." The words were delivered with military precision, but Marcus detected an undertone that made him question what this meeting might entail. He had received similar summons before, usually for commendations or assignment updates, but something about this felt different. The rest of Marcus's morning shift passed slowly, with his mind constantly returning to the commander's words and the strange atmosphere he had witnessed. His fellow guards noticed his distraction, but Marcus maintained his professional demeanor while internally preparing for whatever awaited him. Years of service had taught him that palace life could be unpredictable, but his clean record and exemplary performance gave him confidence that any discussion would be positive. During lunch break, Marcus sat in the staff canteen, mechanically eating his sandwich while observing the usual chatter around him. The familiar faces of colleagues provided some comfort, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change dramatically. His phone buzzed with a text from his wife, asking about dinner plans, and he realized how much his work life had always provided stability for his family. The thought of any disruption to his career sent a chill through him. As the afternoon approached, Marcus found himself checking his watch more frequently than usual. The palace corridors seemed longer as he made his way to Commander Harrison's office, passing portraits of monarchs who had been protected by guards like him for generations. The weight of tradition and responsibility had always motivated him, but now it felt heavier, as if the very history of his position was pressing down on his shoulders. Standing outside the commander's office, Marcus straightened his uniform one final time and knocked on the heavy wooden door. The sound echoed in the corridor, seeming to announce that a significant moment in his career was about to unfold. Whatever lay beyond that door would determine his future with the Royal Guard, and despite his years of experience, Marcus felt his heart rate increase as he waited for permission to enter. Commander Harrison's office felt colder than usual as Marcus stepped inside. The familiar space, with its mahogany desk and walls lined with ceremonial photographs, now seemed charged with an uncomfortable tension. Behind the desk sat not only the commander but also two other officials Marcus recognized from the morning gathering. Their serious expressions immediately told him this was not a routine meeting. "Please sit down, Thompson," Commander Harrison gestured to the chair across from his desk. His voice carried none of the warmth that usually characterized their interactions. Marcus had known the commander for 8 years, and they had developed a mutual respect built on shared dedication to royal security. This formal atmosphere felt completely alien to their usual professional relationship. The silence stretched for several moments before Commander Harrison opened a thick folder on his desk. Marcus could see his own photograph clipped to the inside cover, along with what appeared to be numerous documents and reports. His service record, which he had always been proud of, now seemed to be under scrutiny in a way that made him deeply uncomfortable. "Marcus, Your service to the Crown has been exemplary, the commander began, but his tone suggested that praise was not the purpose of this meeting. However, we need to discuss some recent concerns that have been brought to our attention. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, and he struggled to maintain his composure while his mind raced through recent events, searching for anything that might have triggered this conversation. One of the other officials, whom Marcus recognized as Deputy Director Phillips from the Administrative Department, leaned forward and spoke for the first time. There have been questions raised about your conduct during last week's state dinner, specifically your interaction with the visiting dignitaries and your adherence to established protocols. Marcus felt his mouth go dry as he tried to recall every detail of that evening, wondering what he could have possibly done wrong. The state dinner had been a significant event, with representatives from several Commonwealth nations in attendance. Marcus had been assigned to the main dining hall, a position of trust that reflected his seniority and reliability. He remembered the evening clearly. His positioning had been perfect, his alertness unwavering, and his interactions with staff and guests had been professional and appropriate. The accusation made no sense to him. "I'm sorry, sir, but I'm not sure what concerns you're referring to," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the chaos in his thoughts. "Could you be more specific about what I'm alleged to have done incorrectly?" He had learned long ago that in situations like this, asking for specifics was crucial. Vague accusations could destroy a career, but specific claims could be addressed and defended against. Commander Harrison exchanged glances with his colleagues before responding. "There are reports that you left your assigned position without proper authorization, and that you engaged in unauthorized conversation with foreign security personnel." The words seemed to hang in the air, and Marcus felt as if the ground was shifting beneath him. These were serious allegations that could end his career, but they also felt completely disconnected from reality. Marcus's mind immediately went to the brief conversation he had shared with a security officer from Australia during a shift change. The exchange had lasted perhaps 3 minutes and had focused entirely on comparing security protocols between their respective services. It was the type of professional interaction that happened regularly during international visits and had never been considered problematic before. "Sir, if you're referring to my conversation with Officer Williams from the Australian delegation, that was a routine professional exchange during an authorized break period," Marcus explained, his confidence growing as he recalled the specifics. "I was relieved by Sergeant Davies for exactly 8 minutes as recorded in the shift log, and my conversation was entirely related to security procedures." The third official, whom Marcus now recognized as Internal Affairs Inspector Grant, made a note in his folder before speaking. "The concern isn't necessarily about the content of your conversation, Thompson, but about the appearance of such interactions during a high-security event. There are questions about whether such behavior demonstrates the level of focus and dedication we require from our senior personnel." Marcus felt anger beginning to mix with his confusion. After 15 years of exemplary service, his career was apparently being called into question because of a brief professional conversation that had occurred during an authorized break. The injustice of the situation was almost overwhelming, but his training kept him focused on responding appropriately rather than emotionally. "I understand the importance of maintaining focus during security events," Marcus replied carefully, "but I believe my record speaks to my dedication and professionalism. If there are specific concerns about my performance, I would appreciate the opportunity to address them directly." He knew that this meeting was heading somewhere unpleasant, but he was determined to face whatever came next with the same courage that had defined his military and guard service. Commander Harrison shifted uncomfortably in his chair before delivering the news that would change everything. "Marcus, effective immediately, you're being reassigned from active palace duty to perimeter security at the maintenance facility." The word struck Marcus like lightning, and he felt his 15-year career crumbling around him. The maintenance facility was where guards went when they were being pushed out, a dead-end assignment that everyone understood as career suicide. The room fell silent as Marcus processed this devastating blow. Perimeter security at the maintenance facility meant guarding empty storage buildings and monitoring delivery trucks. It was work that could be done by someone with minimal training, not a decorated veteran with his experience and credentials. The demotion was so severe that it felt more like punishment than reassignment. "Sir, with respect, this seems like an extreme response to what you've described," Marcus managed to say, his voice strained with the effort to remain professional. "Is there no opportunity to discuss this decision, or to understand what specific policy I'm alleged to have violated?" He knew his career was effectively over, but his sense of justice demanded that he at least attempt to fight this inexplicable decision. Inspector Grant closed his folder with a decisive snap. "The decision has been made at the highest levels, Thompson. Your new assignment begins Monday morning. You'll report to Supervisor Jenkins at the maintenance facility at 0800 hours. The finality in his voice made it clear that no amount of protest or explanation would change the outcome. Marcus felt as if he was watching his life fall apart in slow motion. 15 years of dedication, countless hours of training, and an unblemished record meant nothing in the face of whatever political forces had decided his fate. His wife would be devastated when he told her about the demotion, and he wondered how he would explain to his children that their father had been essentially fired from the job he loved. As the meeting concluded and Marcus stood to leave, Commander Harrison's expression softened slightly. "Marcus, I want you to know that this decision didn't come from me. I've always respected your service, and I hope you understand that sometimes we have to follow orders we don't necessarily agree with." The words provided little comfort, but they confirmed Marcus's suspicion that his downfall had been orchestrated by someone higher up the chain of command. Walking back through the palace corridors, Marcus felt like a stranger in a place that had been his second home for over a decade. The portraits of royalty that had once inspired him now seemed to mock his situation. Fellow guards he passed offered friendly nods, unaware that they were acknowledging someone who had just been effectively banished from their ranks. The rest of Marcus's shift passed in a blur of automatic responses and professional behavior, masking inner turmoil. He completed his duties with the same attention to detail that had always characterized his work, but his heart was no longer in it. Every familiar routine now felt like a goodbye, as he realized this would likely be his final week of real guard duty. During his evening commute home, Marcus stared out the train window at the London streets passing by, wondering how he would rebuild his career after this devastating setback. The maintenance facility assignment was clearly designed to force his resignation, but part of him was determined not to give his unknown enemies the satisfaction of seeing him quit. When Marcus arrived home, his wife Sarah immediately noticed his troubled expression. She had been married to him for 12 years and could read his moods better than anyone. "What happened today?" she asked, setting down her coffee and giving him her full attention. The concern in her voice made Marcus realize that his pain would affect not just him, but everyone he loved. "I've been reassigned," Marcus said simply, unable to find words to explain the complexity and injustice of his situation. "They're moving me to perimeter security at the maintenance facility." He watched as understanding dawned in Sarah's eyes, followed quickly by the same anger and confusion he had been feeling since the meeting. Sarah's response was immediate and fierce. "After everything you've given to that place? After all the years of perfect service and dedication? How can they just throw you away like this?" Her loyalty meant everything to Marcus, but it also made the situation more painful, because he knew his family would suffer the consequences of his professional destruction. That night, Marcus lay awake staring at the ceiling, his mind racing through possible explanations for his sudden downfall. He had no political connections or enemies that he knew of, and his service record was spotless. Something else was happening, something beyond his understanding, but he was determined to face whatever came next with dignity, even if it meant accepting the most humiliating assignment of his career. Monday morning arrived with gray skies that perfectly matched Marcus's mood as he reported to the maintenance facility for the first time. The building complex sat on the outskirts of the royal estate, a collection of utilitarian structures that housed everything from gardening equipment to spare furniture. It was a world away from the grandeur of Buckingham Palace, and the contrast felt like a deliberate reminder of how far he had fallen. Supervisor Jenkins turned out to be a gruff man in his 50s who had clearly been expecting Marcus's arrival with little enthusiasm. "So you're the palace guard they've sent us," he said without any attempt at warmth. "Well, this isn't the palace, Thompson. Here we do real work, not just standing around looking pretty in fancy uniforms." The hostility was immediate and unexpected, making Marcus wonder what version of his story had reached this remote outpost. The maintenance facility operated like a small industrial complex, with delivery trucks arriving throughout the day to drop off supplies for various royal properties. Marcus's new role involved checking identification credentials, logging deliveries, and ensuring that no unauthorized personnel entered the restricted areas. It was mind-numbing work that required a fraction of his training and experience. On his first day, Marcus threw himself into the job with the same professionalism he had always demonstrated, despite the degrading nature of the assignment. He memorized delivery schedules, familiarized himself with authorized personnel lists, and maintained detailed logs of every vehicle that entered or left the facility. If he was going to be stuck in this position, he was determined to perform it flawlessly. The other guards at the maintenance facility were a mixed group of older veterans and younger personnel who had never qualified for palace duty. They treated Marcus with a combination of suspicion and curiosity, unsure how to interact with someone who had fallen from such heights. Most kept their distance, perhaps sensing that his presence reminded them of their own limitations within the security hierarchy. By the end of his first week, Marcus had settled into the dreary routine of gate duty and perimeter checks. The work was so routine that he found his mind wandering to memories of his palace days, when every shift brought the possibility of meeting international dignitaries or being part of historically significant events. Now his biggest responsibility was ensuring that the gardening crew's truck had proper identification stickers. The isolation of his new position gave Marcus plenty of time to think about what had led to his downfall. He replayed every interaction from the state dinner, analyzed every decision he had made in recent months, and tried to identify any mistake that could have justified such severe punishment. The more he thought about it, the more convinced he became that his demotion was the result of factors beyond his knowledge or control. During his second week at the maintenance facility, Marcus began to notice patterns in the facility's operations that didn't make sense. Certain delivery trucks arrived at odd hours without proper scheduling, and some of the personnel who came and went seemed to have access levels that exceeded what their roles should have required. His training as a royal guard had sharpened his observational skills, and those instincts were now telling him that something unusual was happening at this supposedly mundane facility. Marcus started keeping his own unofficial log of these irregularities, not out of any official duty, but because his professional instincts wouldn't let him ignore potential security concerns. He noted license plate numbers of vehicles that made multiple unscheduled visits, photographed individuals who seemed to have unrestricted access despite lacking proper identification, and tracked timing patterns that suggested coordinated activities. The more Marcus observed, the more convinced he became that the maintenance facility was being used for purposes beyond its official function. Certain areas of the complex were off-limits even to security personnel, and there were underground levels that didn't appear on any of the facility maps he had been given. His curiosity was becoming dangerous, but after years of protecting royal security, he couldn't simply ignore what appeared to be a significant breach of protocol. One evening, as Marcus completed his shift, he noticed a black sedan with government plates pulling into the restricted section of the facility. Through his binoculars, he watched as several individuals in expensive suits emerged from the vehicle and were escorted into one of the buildings by someone he didn't recognize. The entire interaction lasted less than 10 minutes, but it confirmed his growing suspicion that the maintenance facility was somehow connected to activities that went far beyond its apparent purpose. That night, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Instead of simply documenting his observations, he began to investigate more actively, using his security clearance and knowledge of royal protocols to dig deeper into what was really happening at his new assignment. He had no idea that his downfall had actually positioned him to discover something that would prove his worth in ways he never could have imagined. The irony wasn't lost on him that his punishment assignment might actually be the most important work he had ever done. As he prepared for another day of seemingly routine gate duty, Marcus realized that his career might not be over after all, but instead heading toward a completely unexpected climax that would test everything he had learned during his 15 years of royal service. 3 weeks into his assignment at the maintenance facility, Marcus discovered something that made his blood run cold. While conducting a routine evening perimeter check, He noticed that one of the supposedly secure storage buildings had its door slightly ajar. His training demanded that he investigate any potential security breach, even though this job had taught him that most irregularities at the facility were deliberately overlooked. As Marcus approached the building, he could hear voices coming from inside. The conversation was muffled, but he could make out at least 3 different speakers discussing what sounded like schedules and timing. His instincts told him to call for backup, but his recent experience had taught him that the chain of command at this facility operated by different rules than those he had learned during his palace service. Moving closer to the building, Marcus positioned himself where he could hear more clearly without being detected. The voices became more distinct, and what he heard made him realize that he had stumbled onto something far more serious than unauthorized deliveries or scheduling irregularities. The men inside were discussing security protocols for various royal properties, including detailed information about guard rotations and security weaknesses. One voice, which Marcus recognized as belonging to someone from the administrative staff, was providing specific details about upcoming royal engagements. The king's visit to the children's hospital next Thursday will have minimal security coverage because of the budget constraints, the voice explained. The route has been changed twice, but the final version puts him within range of the construction site on Marlborough Street for approximately 4 minutes. Marcus felt his heart pounding as he realized he was listening to what could only be described as intelligence gathering that posed a direct threat to royal security. His years of training had prepared him to recognize such situations, but he had never imagined he would encounter them while assigned to what was supposed to be a punishment detail. The irony of his situation was almost overwhelming. The conversation continued with discussions of personnel changes, security equipment failures, and communication protocols that revealed an intimate knowledge of royal protection systems. Marcus realized that someone with high-level access was systematically compromising the security of the royal family, and his demotion to this remote facility had accidentally positioned him to discover the plot. As the voices moved closer to the door, Marcus quickly retreated to a position where he could observe without being seen. 3 men emerged from the building, and he was shocked to recognize one of them as Inspector Grant, the same official who had been present during his demotion meeting. The pieces of the puzzle suddenly began falling into place, and Marcus realized that his career, destruction, had been orchestrated by the very people he had now caught in the act of treason. The realization that his demotion was connected to this conspiracy filled Marcus with a mixture of rage and vindication. He had been removed from palace duty, not because of any failure on his part, but because his presence posed a threat to whatever operation was being conducted from the maintenance facility. His reputation for attention to detail and unwavering loyalty had made him a liability to people who needed security, personnel who would look the other way. Marcus spent the rest of his shift documenting everything he had observed, using his phone to photograph the individuals involved and noting the times and details of their activities. His training had taught him the importance of evidence, and he knew that accusations against someone like Inspector Grant would require overwhelming proof to be taken seriously by anyone in a position to act. The next morning, Marcus faced a dilemma that would define the rest of his career and possibly his life. He could report what he had discovered through official channels, but doing so would mean trusting a system that had already betrayed him once. Alternatively, he could continue gathering evidence on his own, risking exposure and potentially giving the conspirators time to complete whatever they were planning. Marcus decided to take a calculated risk and document as much as possible before taking any official action. He began arriving early and staying late, using his security access to monitor the facility more thoroughly. His apparent dedication to his menial job provided perfect cover for his investigation, and none of his supervisors questioned his increased presence. Over the next few days, Marcus compiled evidence of regular meetings, unauthorized access to classified information, and clear indications that the maintenance facility was being used as a base of operations for activities that directly threatened royal security. The scope of the conspiracy became clearer with each piece of evidence, and Marcus realized that he had uncovered something that could have catastrophic consequences if left unchecked. The weight of his discovery was almost unbearable. Marcus knew that the safety of the royal family depended on his actions, but he also understood that making the wrong move could not only destroy his career permanently, but potentially cost lives. His years of loyal service had prepared him for many challenges, but nothing had prepared him for the possibility that the greatest threat to those he had sworn to protect would come from within the very system designed to safeguard them. As Marcus prepared to make the most important decision of his career, he reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought him to this moment. His unjust demotion, which had seemed like the end of everything he had worked for, had actually positioned him to serve his country and his king in ways he never could have imagined from his prestigious post at Buckingham Palace. Marcus knew he had to act quickly when he overheard plans for what could only be described as an attempt on the king's life during the hospital visit. The conspiracy he had uncovered was no longer just about selling information or compromising security. It was about using that information to orchestrate a direct attack on King Charles himself. The weight of this knowledge made every moment of delay potentially catastrophic. The problem was that Marcus couldn't trust anyone within the normal chain of command. Inspector Grant's involvement proved that the conspiracy reached into the highest levels of palace security, and Marcus had no way of knowing how deep the corruption went. Going to Commander Harrison might mean alerting the very people he was trying to stop, but waiting too long could mean missing the opportunity to prevent a tragedy. Marcus made the difficult decision to bypass the entire security hierarchy and go directly to the royal protection detail assigned to the king. He knew that this approach violated every protocol he had ever learned, but the situation demanded unprecedented action. Using his knowledge of palace operations and his remaining security clearances, Marcus identified the senior protection officer who would be directly responsible for the king's safety during the hospital visit, Detective Chief Inspector. Sarah Mitchell had served as the king's personal protection coordinator for 3 years, and Marcus had worked with her team during several high-profile events. He remembered her as someone who valued competence over protocol and who had earned her position through exceptional service rather than political connections. If anyone could be trusted with information this sensitive, it would be someone like Mitchell. Getting access to Mitchell required careful planning and considerable risk. Marcus used his maintenance facility credentials to gain access to a secure communication terminal during an overnight shift, knowing that his actions would be logged and eventually discovered. He sent an encrypted message through official channels requesting an urgent meeting regarding a threat to the king's security, using authentication codes from his palace service that would prove his identity. The response came within hours, indicating that Mitchell had taken his warning seriously enough to arrange a covert meeting. The location was a small cafe near Westminster Bridge, chosen because it was public enough to seem innocent, but isolated enough for sensitive conversation. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and terror as he prepared for a meeting that would either save his career and the king's life, or destroy everything he had left. When Marcus arrived at the cafe, he immediately recognized Mitchell despite her civilian clothes. She had chosen a corner table with clear sightlines to all entrances, and her positioning told him that she was taking his warning seriously. Her expression was cautious but alert, the look of someone prepared for significant news but hoping it wouldn't be as bad as anticipated. Marcus wasted no time with pleasantries, immediately presenting the evidence he had compiled over the past several weeks. He showed Mitchell photographs of the unauthorized meetings, recordings of conversations that revealed classified information, and detailed logs of suspicious activities at the maintenance facility. Her expression grew more serious with each piece of evidence, and Marcus could see that his worst fears were being confirmed. "My God, Marcus," Mitchell said quietly after reviewing the materials. "You realize what you've uncovered here? This isn't just a security breach. It's a coordinated effort to compromise the entire protection system." Her words validated everything Marcus had suspected, but they also confirmed that the threat was even more serious than he had imagined. Mitchell immediately began making secure phone calls to trusted colleagues, using code words and procedures that Marcus recognized from his own training. She was activating emergency protocols designed for exactly this type of situation, where the normal chain of command had been compromised. Marcus watched as the full weight of the royal protection apparatus began mobilizing around the intelligence he had provided. Within an hour, Mitchell had assembled a small team of absolutely trusted officers who could coordinate a response without alerting the compromised elements within the security structure. Marcus found himself at the center of an operation that was simultaneously investigating the conspiracy he had discovered and planning countermeasures to protect the king. During his scheduled public appearance, the plan that emerged was both elegant and dangerous. Rather than canceling the king's hospital visit, which would alert the conspirators that their plot had been discovered, the protection team would proceed with the appearance while secretly monitoring all the individuals Marcus had identified. The goal was not only to prevent the attack, but to gather enough evidence to prosecute everyone involved in the conspiracy. Marcus's role in this operation would be crucial, but extremely risky. He would need to return to the maintenance facility and continue his routine duties while secretly coordinating with Mitchell's team to provide real-time intelligence about the conspirators' activities. If his investigation was discovered, he would be in immediate danger, but his position remained the best source of information about the timing and details of the planned attack. As the meeting concluded, Mitchell looked directly at Marcus with an expression of respect that he hadn't seen from a superior officer since his demotion. "Marcus, I want you to know that what you've done here goes far beyond duty. You've potentially saved not just the king's life, but the stability of the entire monarchy. Whatever happened to put you in that assignment was the luckiest break this country has had in years." Walking back to the maintenance facility that evening, Marcus felt a sense of purpose and validation that had been missing since his demotion. His career might have been destroyed by the very people he was now working to stop, but his actions in the coming days would prove his worth in ways that no amount of routine palace duty ever could. The next 24 hours would determine whether his discovery would prevent a national tragedy, or whether he had acted too late to stop forces that had been in motion far longer than anyone realized. The morning of the king's hospital visit arrived with unusual activity at the maintenance facility. Marcus watched as several of the conspirators arrived earlier than normal, their nervous energy suggesting that today was the culmination of whatever they had been planning. Through his earpiece, he maintained constant communication with Mitchell's team, providing real-time updates about movements and conversations that could indicate the timing of their planned attack. At precisely 10:30, Inspector Grant arrived with two other men Marcus had never seen before. They moved with the focused determination of people executing a carefully rehearsed plan, and their arrival coincided with reports from Mitchell's team that unusual activity was being detected along the king's route to the hospital. The conspiracy was clearly entering its final phase, and Marcus felt the weight of responsibility as the primary source of intelligence, for the operation meant to stop it. Marcus continued his routine duties while secretly monitoring the conspirators' activities through a network of surveillance, equipment that Mitchell's team had covertly installed overnight. The technology allowed them to track conversations and movements throughout the facility without alerting the suspects that their operation had been discovered. Every word and action was being recorded as evidence for the prosecutions that would follow. Shortly after noon, Marcus received an encrypted message that made his heart race. The king had departed Buckingham Palace for his hospital visit, and the protection team had confirmed that individuals matching the descriptions of the conspirators had been spotted at various points along the planned route. The attack was imminent, but the exact timing and method remained unclear, making Marcus's position as the inside observer absolutely critical. As Marcus watched from his guard post, Inspector Grant emerged from one of the restricted buildings carrying a secure communication device. The expression on his face was one of cold determination, and Marcus realized he was witnessing the final moments before whatever attack had been planned would be executed. Through his earpiece, he quickly relayed this development to Mitchell's team, knowing that lives might depend on the timing of this information. What happened next would be burned into Marcus's memory forever. Instead of the king's motorcade appearing on the scheduled route, a convoy of unmarked vehicles suddenly surrounded the maintenance facility. Elite protection officers emerged from these vehicles with tactical precision, moving to secure every exit and entrance to the complex. The conspiracy had been turned into a trap, with the conspirators now finding themselves completely surrounded. The arrests happened with startling speed and efficiency. Inspector Grant and his accomplices were taken into custody before they could destroy evidence or alert other members of their network. Marcus watched from his post as the man who had orchestrated his downfall was led away in handcuffs, the secure communication device he had been carrying now serving as evidence of his treason against the crown. Within minutes of the arrests, a familiar black sedan pulled into the facility's main entrance. Marcus felt his breath catch as he realized who was emerging from the vehicle. King Charles himself, accompanied by his personal protection detail, walked directly toward the maintenance facility where Marcus was stationed. The hospital visit had been a deception designed to draw out the conspirators, while the king secretly came to witness their capture. As the king approached Marcus's guard post, their eyes met for the first time in Marcus's 15-year career. The monarch's expression was one of genuine gratitude and respect, and Marcus felt overwhelmed by the realization that his actions had not only prevented an attack, but had earned the direct attention of the man he had sworn to protect. "Sergeant Thompson," the king said, using Marcus's proper rank despite his demotion, "I understand that your vigilance and dedication have prevented a serious threat to the crown." His words carried the weight of royal acknowledgement, but more importantly, they represented a recognition of Marcus's true worth that no administrative decision could diminish. Detective Chief Inspector Mitchell appeared at the king's side and addressed Marcus directly. "Your Majesty, Sergeant Thompson's actions went far beyond his official duties. His investigation uncovered a conspiracy that had been developing for months, and his willingness to risk everything to report it prevented what could have been a national tragedy." The formal recognition meant everything to Marcus, but the king's presence made it truly extraordinary. King Charles extended his hand to Marcus, a gesture that represented not just royal gratitude but personal respect between two men who understood the meaning of duty. "Sergeant Thompson, effective immediately, you are reinstated to active palace duty with a commendation for exceptional service to the crown. Your actions today demonstrate the very best traditions of the Royal Guard, and your country owes you a debt of gratitude." As Marcus shook the king's hand, he reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him to this moment. His unjust demotion had seemed like the end of his career, but it had actually positioned him to serve his country in ways he never could have imagined. The maintenance facility assignment that was meant to break his spirit had instead given him the opportunity to prove his worth beyond any doubt. The conspiracy had been completely unraveled, with arrests extending beyond the maintenance facility to include corrupt officials throughout the security hierarchy. Marcus's evidence had provided the foundation for prosecutions that would restore integrity to the royal protection system, and his actions had prevented what could have been one of the most serious attacks on the monarchy in modern history. As the king departed and normal operations resumed, Marcus found himself looking forward to returning to Buckingham Palace, not as a disgraced guard accepting a punishment assignment, but as a decorated officer whose dedication had been proven under the most challenging circumstances imaginable. His career had been saved not by political connections or administrative mercy, but by his unwavering commitment to the principles that had guided him throughout 15 years of service. The maintenance facility gradually returned to its legitimate functions, but Marcus knew he would never forget the lessons learned during his weeks in exile. Sometimes the most important service happens in the most unlikely places, and sometimes career setbacks can lead to opportunities for heroism that would never have existed otherwise. His story would become part of Royal Guard tradition, a reminder that true dedication to duty can overcome any obstacle and serve the crown in ways that no one could ever predict.